Hi, I'm Andrew McCrae. Welcome to our farm and ranch in northwest Missouri. My great-great-grandfather settled here in 1910, and I'm the fifth generation to grow crops and livestock here. As a farmer myself, I know the highs and lows of this life, the issues we confront every day, some new, some as old as farming itself. This show is a place to talk with farmers and others in the ag industry about topics that mean something to us, topics that can improve the present and future of our operations. This is Farming the Countryside. Greg Peterson joins me. Greg is a regular guest here on the show as we get updates on everything machinery and more. Greg, since we last visited, I think there has been quite a bit change. Now, we have had higher interest rates for quite a while. We have seen tighter crop margins and lower commodity prices. But when we spoke probably 6 months ago, really the prices for machinery hadn't changed a whole lot. We were still setting up at the top, and maybe you were starting to see that erode just a bit. But I'm wondering now, 6 months later, if you're going to tell me we've definitely seen a change. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be accurate, Andrew. Particularly since July 1st is what I've seen on the hard cash auction pricing, and of course, used valuations. The ongoing tightening stress of just where our commodity prices are and the profit pressure on producers has them in a pullback mode. And the supply issue of used equipment is not what it was 2.5, 3 years ago when the supply chain mess was unfolding and unwinding and dealers had no inventory, farmers had money. Now it's flipped. Dealers have too much late model inventory, farmers don't have as much available funds. And what's different now, Andrew, is the items on the dealer lot, even compared to 5 years ago. If you've got, we got 20 too many late model combines, but it's what they're on the books for. And that's where that 8% interest is, even though we've seen way higher in the past, going way back, if you're old like me, over double that. But that's a meat grinder that hasn't been there for dealers, and farmers on equipment deals. So it's changing everything and putting pressure on the system.
When we visited the last several times, and as we do this, every 6 months or so, you had mentioned to me that, okay, well, heading into this, times have changed some. Dealer groups are larger. They've experienced this before. They're not going to get caught with this. So have they done a pretty good job of managing it, or was there any way to manage this? Because as you mentioned, some of that equipment's sitting there at a pretty high interest rate now, what they have on the lots.
Yeah, I think there's been some differences. No, I guess the comparison I look at, Andrew, is versus 10 years ago, the last downturn in commodity prices, April, May of 13 through 14, 15 on, versus now. So obviously there's way fewer number of dealers, like you mentioned. They're way bigger. They're capitalized different. So they have, the amount of used inventory has gone up just like it did back then. But what's different is how they are handling it. And so the biggest data point I'm looking at, I just call it the rate of turn. So I looked at numbers through the month of August at the raw number of 1 and 2 year old farm equipment units sold at auction. And we're up 98% versus last year. And if you go back 10 years ago, it's shocking. It's like 420% increase. So that's what that is these large dealers just getting super aggressive. So your listeners all over, North America, I'm sure they've seen it, particularly this summer, where you'd see, down your way, like in Paris, Missouri, I think it was the largest auction I've ever seen for late model equipment. Wheeler Auctions and Real Estate. It was July 27th. We went down to film it. I mean, there were 15, I can't remember, it was 15 or 18 dealers with tons of big late model stuff. And of course, supply and demand, when you have an increased supply and the dollars are pulling back. Now, there's still a lot of old money, quote unquote, old money at play in the market. One of the things I've been watching is kind of that vibe on when does that old money start to run out. And I think what you'd see there is some more significant changes with land values, which we've seen the edges come off, but it's still pretty high. And with machinery, it's been a little quicker. I give you an example here. So if you look at a John Deere X9 1100 combine, of course, big late model combine. Average auction price now is running, I think, $471,300 basically. This year, average dealer ad price on the lot is like $715,500. So we've talked before. I have this thing called our machine repeat ratio. It's the average auction price divided by the average dealer ad price on any item. Been tracking it 25 years. It's normally right in the 71 to 76% range. So if you get above that, like we were a couple years ago, it's red hot. Below it, like now, it's soft. So on X9 1100, at the end of June, my machine repeat ratio was 67.9%. Now it's down to 65.9. So it's dropping. And that's just auction prices softening in July and August.
So what will these dealers do then? Are they going to continue to move this and just get it off the lot at, in a sense, whatever cost? Because you mentioned the big machinery auction there in Paris, Missouri.
Yeah, the losses they're sustaining at auction are brutal. I mean, they're brutal. And but the options aren't great. I mean, we're starting to see more lease offers. You can try that. You can, the OEMs are starting, it took them a while to realize what was happening. Dealers were telling them 6-8 months ago, like, we won't be selling as much new. It just ain't going to happen. And the tricky part is they're coming off of very, very good years. So if you're a manufacturer, you're like, hey, you sold X number of planters, X number of combines. You can push that a little more, right? And the manufacturers, they're kind of incentivizing dealers, based on your market share and new unit sales. So one fascinating thing I've been seeing, Andrew, is dealers now, because there's fewer of them and they're way bigger than they were 10 years ago, they have leverage that was not there before back towards the OEM. And the big dealers are saying, our focus in 24 into 25 is going to be dealing with the issue at hand, which is this buildup of excess late model used inventory. And so it's no fun for them to take it out to auction and get clobbered. But if you look back, and this is the part for farmers are really good at it because generationally they farmed with their dad and their grandpa and stuff. So it's the arc of history. And if you're a dealer and you look back over the arc of history, it's never been good to do the old hold and hope strategy. Well, price going, let's just wait. And right now you're paying 8% interest on all that. So you're waiting and you're getting pounded on that side. So that's why they're taking it out to auction. Now, there was so much out through July and August that I was hearing murmurs, like dealers were like, okay, let's take a breath. Let's try every other avenue here. But I think what we're looking at coming up is the 2 months of November and December with a bullseye on them. And I don't think there's any way around. We're going to see an ocean of good late model equipment hitting the auction market. Dealers playing into the fact that 20 of the last 21 years, auction prices go up November, December, because of course, Joe Farmer wants to minimize whatever tax bill he does have with equipment purchases. So it's going to be a fascinating couple of months coming up.
So do you think this is the 1 year, or I guess the 2 years out of the last 22 that the price goes down in November and December?
Well, I would tell you the only year it didn't was 2015. Now, 2015 was, okay, so the end of 2015, that was 2.5 years into the downturn. And we're not there yet in terms of time. Now, again, the rate of turn is faster. Dealers are pumping it out. I think one danger for farmers, again, it sort of works against your collective history of you and your dad and your grandpa and your uncles. That, when things turn, we can sit tight and we can, those used equipment deals will be there in year 2, 3, 4. And they may be, but we've never seen stuff turn this fast. So to assume that, the last downturn was between 2.5 and 3 years, middle of 13 and through 15, early 16, and then it just kind of flattened. So I think the space is more efficient now, which is a good thing if you're on the dealer manufacturer side. And on the farmer side, I just say, be aware that it's turning faster. But I think the general thought is, we have a ways to go with, unless corn and beans, where they're at, there's just going to be a little probably this trend will continue through 24 into 25.
So given all this news, is this a time where if a farmer has some money to be able to go out and get a good deal at this point, or where are we at in this market? That's easy to say because if you have tight margins and high interest rates, you may not have the cash to go make that deal. But is it a time if I can make the deal to go do it?
Well, Andrew, you always ask the right questions. That's why I like talking to you, man. That is the pertinent question right now. And I've actually been bringing this up gently when I've been out across the U.S. and Canada speaking, that in fact, our partners at Farm Journal, they probably asked you as well, but they said, hey, Greg, we got our upcoming issue, or maybe it was Top Producer. And they said, we want to talk to younger-ish, folks who are going to be taking over the farm. What pieces of advice do you have for them? And I thought, well, that's a really good question. And my number one piece of advice was the theory of opposites. Just what you said. So when a market is in downturn, that is the time to be aggressive. Now, easy for me to say, sitting down here in my basement, Machinery Pete, collecting these prices for 35 years. But I say that because it's true. I mean, if your powder's dry, the deals you can get on late model used equipment now are tremendous compared to even the start of 24. And, chances are they might even get better here as we go. But again, I'm telling you, the rate of turn is fast. So a fascinating thought exercise over the second beer late at night or whatever, go into machinerypete.com, go into the auction prices, and we go back 24 years there. So just look at end of 2015 and look at what a 5 to 7 year old tractor, combine, sprayer, planter was selling for hard cash. And your eyeballs might fall out of your head. That's why I wrote a column for Farm Journal December of 15 that despite my Norwegianness, I don't like telling people, hey, do this, do that. That's not me. But I said, just based on the data, I'm like, folks, you'll never have a better chance to update your used equipment line with late model used than right now because you're in the driver's seat. And I think I've had two farmers just recently last week, Andrew, come up to me and say, you think it's a good time to get aggressive? And I said, I do. And so that just is what it is.
So when you look across all of those different pieces of machinery, is it pretty much across the board that you would say that you could find deals there? Or is there any one segment of the market where if it's combines or larger horsepower tractors or so forth?
Yeah, it's definitely focused on the large grain side. Actually, it's the opposite. And this is the danger about generalizing. I'm sitting here painting this negative picture. But if you look at used equipment valuation trends in the mid-size, you get into the livestock producers, the dairy, good used hay equipment has been strong. I had 2 days in a row a couple of weeks ago where we saw a New Holland roll belt 560 late model round baler. One set a record in North Dakota. The next day it got blown away by one in like Ohio or Illinois. So it depends on what you're looking at. Loader tractors continue to be very strong. But I think the opportunity lies on the large horsepower tractors right now. Combines, they started to readjust a year ago. Actually, in December of 22 into 23, we probably talked about that, but which is why, again, for 35 years now, Andrew, I love auction data because it doesn't matter what I think or you think or anybody, someone like me who's covered it for 35 years. When things change, they just change and stuff starts adjusting. And used combines inventory started to build quickly on dealer lots end of 22, and that put downward pressure on the auction prices. And they adjusted harshly in 23. They're still adjusting. But in 24 now, the large horse tractors are, they're starting down that road too.
You brought up something I wanted to get over to, which is maybe some of that hay equipment or mid-sized tractors. The cattle market has been strong, and several cattle producers probably have crops as well. So maybe it gets mingled together, but the cattle market has been strong. They've been able to make some profits and may continue to. So does that keep that portion of the market stronger, or is there enough overlay or overhead, so to speak, of all the crop machinery out there that it just brings the whole market down, every size of equipment, so to speak?
Well, I would say it's a combination of both those things you described. So what I would say is that, to me, and our data would show this, I think the absolute top of this last cycle was late 21 to early 23. Now, that particular sector you described, the livestock, that the good used loader tractors, the hay equipment, that carried through 23 into 24, still strong, maybe not quite as strong. And frankly, here again, our human nature, and I understand it when people say, oh my God, the sky is falling and blah, blah, blah. Well, the period from late 2020, 21, 22, that may be the highest, used equipment period ever. It's the highest I've seen in my 35 years by far. So when we compare that to what just happened, yeah, it makes it seem worse by comparison right now. But on the large ag side, it has fallen. The late model side, it's fallen faster. The one other area I would carve out, Andrew, that's held up better is the, nice condition, older equipment, the pre-def, pre-tier 4, so 2011 and before. So as we're seeing this more aggressive recalibration on the 1 to 3, 4-year-old large stuff, at the same time, I'm still seeing very strong auction pricing. I mean, we just saw, we're talking on a Monday, 2 days before this, or 4 days before, there was a sale in Southwest Minnesota that had a 2008 Case Edge Magnum 245 that brought 151K, fourth highest price ever, third highest price ever. So now if that same tractor would have sold 12 months ago, it probably would have brought 161 to 165. It's still high, but again, those are some of the shades of the market that I'm seeing.
We get into these time periods. Do people, of course, then hold their equipment longer, their combines and tractors? And how long does that usually lengthen out then the amount of time that they're holding onto that equipment?
Answer is yes, they do hold. I mean, I could feel it on the show circuit we were on last winter, Commodity Classic and Louisville and all the farm shows in Des Moines and whatnot. Farmers were verbalizing it at the time. And I think one of the factors that doesn't get accounted for, I mean, you can look at the data from AEM and, the raw unit sales for high horse tractors or combines up, down how much, whatever. But if you pull back, there's been a lot of equipment purchased the last 3 years, both new and used. And when farmers had money, they were updating their lines. So when it turns, it does make it easier for them to go, you know what? I think we're good. Now, I hear that verbalized wherever I go, but I mentioned old money before. So even when dollars are tight, there's no more savvy business group than our audience, farmers. So they're aware of that. So I've had numerous farmers tell me, well, I wasn't really looking, but I picked up a second combine, an S680 or a Case 7240, because either at auction or on the dealer lot, the deal was right. So again, situationally, they're at play there, picking off good deals. So I guess that's, that old money is something I'll be watching here the rest of 24 into 25.
With the time we have left here, let me take you in a slightly different direction. Did you happen to go to the Minnesota State Fair this year?
I did not go this year. Andrew, we have our first grandson a year ago, and they were visiting. Plus, I think a couple of days of the fair, the heat index was over 100, and this Norwegian boy melts when it gets that hot. But I was following it closely. Did you get to the fair?
I did. And one of the things I was going to bring up with you, I enjoy walking down through the antique steam engines and antique tractors and so forth. I was just curious, in these times, do those, what I would call collector's items, do they hold their value, or does that even wane because it's still tied enough to the farm market, or do collector's items and those classic old time tractors and so forth hold their value regardless, kind of like gold coins, so to speak?
Yeah, that's again a great question. It's fantastic. Our data would say basically yes, the money is still there. So who's the buyer of these vintage? I mean, I'm 58, so guys like me or older than me are buying. So yeah, the money's there. So when the right one comes along, there was a sale back. So it was a few months ago. It was end of April, but it had a 22-hour John Deere 4055 So we're talking, what's that, early 90s model? So it's a time piece. It was a sale in Berlin, Wisconsin. So I was real interested to see, things are changing here. Here's a time machine. What's it going to go for? Well, the highest I'd ever seen was 93,000, and it went for 275. Right next to it was a 4455 Deere with 2,260 hours. Highest I just saw the record. I was in Kentucky, October of last year. So I want to go for 97,850. The guy bought it, and then he had a Sharpie, and he goes, "Machinery Pete, you got to sign my tractor." So I signed it. But so that was the record, 97,850. Well, this one went for 160. Now that was April, and that's kind of that, I guess vintagey 80, 90 stuff. But again, just 4 days ago, I saw a nice Super MTA go for $7,900. Not a record, but good money. So for the right items, the money's still there. I think what you see on the collector market is the stuff in kind of okay, being Minnesota nice. Well, that's okay, kind of fair. Those prices have softened.
Those, nobody has the extra money to put the money into it to bring it up to speed.
Yes. Now I have a question for you. You were at the Minnesota State Fair. Of course, our food options are endless there. So I heard this year the big thing was a ranch on a stick. Do you have that?
No, I avoid the long lines.
What was the best thing you ate there?
I tend to go eat walleye at the Minnesota State Fair because it's Minnesota, so you got to eat walleye. But the longest line by far at the Minnesota State Fair is the line for the donuts, and you may have to help me with somebody.
That's so good. Well, the donuts and Grandma's chocolate chip cookies, man.
Oh yeah, the cookie line is big too. The pail of cookies, but that donut line, because my kids are in 4-H and FFA, so we're at the 4-H building. That line for the donuts stretches over 2 blocks, and I want to go there on a media pass. I'm there for the kids, so I don't want to mess around doing interviews. But I want to interview the guy at the end of the donut line that's 2 blocks long and say, is it worth it? I guess it is, because you're in line for 2 blocks.
2 things. I would say there's no question it's worth it. It's just, I don't care if it's 8 blocks long. It's worth it. Stand in line. Even if it's 100-degree index, stand in line. Get it. Now, with that media pass, so you have the opportunity. You can zoom up to the front and get yourself some donuts. But then, Andrew, you'd be like me, and my wife, Jackie, laughs at me. When we drift into the Twin Cities and you got the honor off ramp coming for I-94, technically you're supposed to get in the right lane and queue up to make the exit. You get a big traffic jam. And Mrs. Pete says, no, drive up ahead and then just cut in right in front. And if I'm driving the Machinery Pete pickup, I ain't doing that. I'm going to the back and I'm waiting my turn. That's just, Minnesota-ness. But for donuts, I would take that media pass, go up front and get me some fresh donuts.
Well, words of wisdom for next time. I will sometime eat a donut there and a Pronto Pup. I've not had the Pronto Pups yet at the Minnesota State Fair.
Andrew, we got some work to do next August.
Yeah, I know, but got to get the kids through the 4-H building, and that's the main thing in FFA. But maybe I'll get there early and get my Pronto Pup a donut some here.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Always fun, Andrew. Catch you later.